Welcome to the Cheating and Love Tales channel. I followed her, or tried to anyway. At first, I couldn't even get up from the floor. My legs refused to cooperate. Something in me had broken the second I realized she was leaving the house not just for groceries or errands, but for him. I dropped to my knees, pressing my palm against the cold tile, knees screaming in protest. In that moment, the world felt like it had shrunk to the size of that cramped hallway. I could see the front door still ajar, her silhouette disappearing into the late afternoon sun. That's how it started, the final unraveling of everything I thought I knew. It wasn't an accident that I ended up on the floor. My body felt heavier than it had any right to be. Maybe it was the weight of knowing. Maybe it was denial, fighting to keep me from rising and seeing the ugly truth. But I forced myself up, hands shaking, and stumbled to the window that overlooked the driveway. There she was, Rachel, getting into her car. She always drove so carefully, slow in backing out. Not this time. Tires squealed against the pavement as she drove off. No glance in the rearview mirror, no final check to see if her husband was standing there, watching her go. I wiped sweat from my forehead and took a breath so sharp it felt like a knife to the lungs. My father used to say, "You want answers, you chase them." He never told me that the chase might kill something inside you. Yet I followed her. My Chevy's engine roared to life as I pulled out behind her, keeping a few car lengths of distance, heart hammered, mouth dry, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to this world. We drove through our suburban neighborhood. Neat lawns, kids playing catch, some guy washing his SUV. I wondered if any of them looked at me, if they had any idea that my life was blowing apart. She took the highway, going north. I turned on the radio, hoping it'd distract me. It didn't. All I heard was the sound of my own thoughts, memories, regrets, snapshots of the last few months. I tried to recall when I first smelled a hint of someone else on her pillow. It wasn't cologne I recognized, but it spoke of a man's presence. That's what lodged in my head like a bullet. The pillow smelled like a different sweat, a different skin, a stranger. And when I confronted her about it, actually, I didn't even confront her. I just asked about the new detergent she was using. She had answered too quickly, her voice too tight. That was the first real crack in the dam. We traveled an hour, then she took an exit for a motel off the interstate. My chest tightened. I slowed, let her pass into the parking lot. She got out of the car, glancing around. My wife of 7 years, scanning the area for onlookers, her face tense with anticipation. Then he appeared, Daniel Carter, my brother, the same man who used to share my bunk bed when we were kids, stealing my baseball cards. He was the one meeting her there. He walked up, confident as ever, ran a hand through his dark hair, then leaned in to kiss her. I couldn't see where his lips landed, cheek, mouth, but it hardly mattered. In that moment, my vision blurred with pure, raw anger. Every muscle in my body tensed so violently that I had to grip the dashboard to keep from storming out. I told myself, "Wait, you need to see, to be sure." But the part of me that could still feel reason realized I was plenty sure. I'd known it the minute I saw her slip out that front door. He put an arm around her waist. She led him inside. I stayed in my truck, heart thumping like a drum. I stayed there 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then I followed them in. The motel door they vanished through was closed, but the blinds were slightly parted. I fought the urge to kick it down. Instead, I edged closer, hearing their voices through the thin walls. His low laugh, her softer one. Then the unmistakable sounds of lips meeting, clothes rustling, a slight moan that twisted in my gut. The hall smelled of stale cigarettes and spilled beer, but all I could think was, this is what she's doing. Right now. My wife, with my brother, a mere door's thickness away. An image burned its way into my mind, her body pressed against his, their kisses, the flush on her cheeks. It was less about any specific detail, more about the total devastation. Everything I believed in, reduced to a cheap motel. I walked back to my truck, numb and shaking. That was the first time I felt actual hatred in my chest. White-hot, lethal. I drove away but not far. Parked behind a gas station. I had to pull myself together. Slumped over the steering wheel. I tried to breathe. Tried to piece it all into sense. Instead, I recalled the letter from the clinic that arrived 2 days before. She hadn't opened it. I had forging her signature because something in my gut told me I had to. The test results were clear. Our baby girl, the one I'd cradled for 2 months, wasn't mine by blood. Guilt and betrayal strangled me. I loved that child. I still do. But that letter told me how deep the lie went. When I could think straight enough to drive, I returned home. By the time I arrived, the sun had dipped low. The living room was silent, the baby sleeping in her crib. I looked at her for a long time, guilt gnawing at me. Not her fault. Not even her mother's, in a certain twisted sense. Rachel must have found something in Daniel that she didn't find in me. But that knowledge didn't lessen the pain. Eventually, I ended up in the bedroom, staring at that damned pillow that smelled of him, a detail so trivial yet so telling. For a moment, I wanted to bury my face in it, catch any trace of the truth, let it carve me up inside until I felt nothing. Instead, I tore off the pillowcase and stuffed it in the trash, forcing myself not to lose control completely. Rachel returned a couple of hours later. We barely exchanged words. She said she'd had an impromptu meeting at school. I nodded, letting the lie settle between us like toxic fumes. As she slept, I stayed awake, planning. I was never the spontaneous one. Daniel was that guy. I was the older brother, the stable, dependable one, the good catch who grew up to be the steady corporate guy in a tidy suburban home. Now I was that same man, with a meltdown simmering in my chest, uncertain whether I wanted to cry, smash a wall, or both. By morning, I had a plan, or at least the start of one. I would get my revenge in a quiet, systematic way. No big confrontation with Rachel yet. No messy fight. I'd spent years honing the skill of controlling my temper, and I sure as hell wasn't going to lose my head before I had something to show for it. I'd carefully gather every old letter, every note she'd ever written me. The ones where she wrote forever, always, only you. All those sentimental words that now tasted like poison. I'd mark them with a red pen. Return to sender, or better yet, wrong address, and mail them back to her mother's house in Santa Fe. Let them land on the doorstep she grew up on, like a goddamn funeral procession for our marriage. I spent the next day rummaging through boxes in the garage, the closet, searching for every scrap of paper. Our wedding invitations, old love letters, even random sticky notes that said, "Love you, baby." She used to tape them to my coffee mug sometimes. All of it. Then I put them in a large envelope, wrote her maiden name on it, and addressed it to her mother. I didn't think about my brother, about how he'd wormed his way back into her life. Or maybe I did. But in that moment, all I cared about was letting the sting of betrayal sink into her veins, the same way it was drowning me. She came in at one point, curious what I was doing. I told her I was reorganizing. She gave me a wary look, but didn't press. That night, I mailed the letters, dropped them in a blue USPS box with a trembling hand, feeling like I was dropping a piece of my soul in there with them. Overly dramatic, maybe, but heartbreak is like that. Even as I felt the rage swirling inside me, a flicker of sadness nagged at my chest. I remembered the day we wrote each other those notes, giddy in the early months of marriage. If you told me then that we'd end up here, with me mailing them back in an act of petty vengeance, I'd have laughed in your face. I told myself it was just the start. I needed more. I needed to stare her in the eyes and see some sign of remorse. But the next morning, a separate bombshell. Another letter arrived for her, this time from the same clinic. A follow-up. She tossed it into a drawer, unopened, like it was worthless. That was the final twist of the knife. She knew. Of course, she knew that child wasn't mine. She just wanted to keep the facade going, maybe long enough for me to sign the birth certificate or whatever. My phone buzzed, and I saw Daniel's name appear. I'd ignored his calls for weeks, ever since I suspected something off. Couldn't confront him yet. I wasn't ready to see his lying face, so I let it go to voicemail. That evening, I found the photograph. She'd left it on the bathroom counter, probably fell out of her purse. It showed them, locked in an embrace at some place that looked suspiciously like our father's old cabin, a place of so many childhood memories. My father had left that cabin to me and Daniel after he died. I gave Daniel the key, never suspecting he'd turn it into his own secret hideaway with my wife. In that photo, I recognized the couch we used to sprawl on as kids. Now it was the backdrop to their twisted romance. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I tore the photo in half, but then I taped it back together. I needed proof. Evidence for myself, if nothing else. That night, I confronted her in the bedroom. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice low and cold. "Where were you?" I asked. She blinked, face pale. "Ouch," she said. "School meeting." I held up the photo. She went white. She tried to speak, but only managed a few breathy stammers. I threw the picture onto the bed. "Don't bother lying," I said. "I know about everything. The test results. The motel. The cabin." Her eyes glistened with tears. "Michael, please. You're misunderstanding." That was when I lost it. I shoved the nightstand, knocking over a lamp. The baby woke and started wailing in the other room. Rachel ran out to comfort her. I stayed behind, teeth clenched, fists balled. I wanted to chase after her and scream until my throat tore, but hearing the baby cry pulled me back. That was an innocent life, caught in the middle of this disaster. The baby needed quiet, safety, two things I was failing to provide. I ended up storming outside, taking a walk in the darkness, just me and the chirping of distant crickets. The image of Daniel with Rachel flared in my head like a neon sign. I felt an ache behind my eyes. My father raised me to keep composure, to not let anger rule me. But this was beyond anger. It was heartbreak, betrayal, humiliation, and yes, a desire to make them pay. Over the next few days, she tried to talk. I refused. Instead, I slammed every door I passed through. I avoided her. Maybe I wanted her to feel the same isolation I felt. Each night I slept on the couch, body stiff and mind racing with hateful thoughts. She'd drift in, stand near me, trying to find words. But I'd shut my eyes, pretend I was already asleep. I even turned off my phone to dodge calls from Daniel. The silence grew so thick it choked the house. And then I escalated the revenge. I found every picture we'd taken together. Wedding photos, honeymoon, pictures of us at the Grand Canyon. I cut them out of their frames. In their place, I inserted photos of blank walls, empty rooms, or I just left the frames shattered on the floor for her to find. I set aside the real pictures in a dusty cardboard box. Part of me wanted to burn them, but for some reason I couldn't. Maybe some fraction of me hoped I'd want them back someday. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to watch those memories go up in flames. After that, I went back to my job as a regional sales manager, forcing myself to keep it together in meetings. My colleagues noticed something was off. I told them I was dealing with a family matter. That's an understatement. I tried burying my anger in spreadsheets and sales figures, but every so often, my phone would vibrate. A text from Rachel asking me to come home early, or a missed call from Daniel. I'd see his name, feel that spike of rage, and toss the phone aside. On the fourth day, I returned home to find Rachel on the couch, tears staining her cheeks. She stood as soon as I opened the door. "Michael," she began, "we need to talk. Really talk." I dropped my keys on the table. "There's nothing you can say that I want to hear." She came closer, voice shaky. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. A mistake." I snapped. "Which part? Sleeping with my brother, or passing off his kid as mine. She flinched. Her eyes flicked to the hallway where the baby's room was. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "I didn't plan for any of this. It just happened." Hate that phrase. It just happened. Like it's an accident, not a conscious choice. I stared at her, seeing a stranger in the woman I'd once loved. "You do realize it's over, don't you?" She swallowed hard. "I don't want it to be over. I want us to work this out." That nearly made me laugh out loud. "Work out? You think there's a fix for this?" My voice rose, and I took a step toward her. Her eyes darted downward, but she stood her ground. I almost respected that. Almost. "I know you're sorry, but it doesn't erase what you did." She folded her arms, hugging herself. "I was lonely, Michael. You were always working, always putting your job first. Daniel just listened." Tears welled up again. He understood me in a way you never try to. I felt a twist of pain. So that's how it was. She needed more attention. So she hopped into bed with the closest available man, my brother. I inhaled sharply. "I can't do this right now." I brushed past her. "I need some air." She called after me, but I left. Slammed the door. In the driveway, I paused, wanting to smash my fist into my car's hood. Instead, I slid behind the wheel and sped off. I felt claustrophobic in that house, suffocated by her desperation and my own anger. I ended up at the old basketball court, where I used to shoot hoops with Daniel when we were teens. The place was empty, a single streetlight flickering overhead. I found a stray ball left behind by some kid, dribbled it a couple of times. Each bounce echoed in the silence. I launched shot after shot, missing more than I made. My arms burned, sweat pouring off me. But I kept shooting until my body gave out, collapsing onto the bench. My phone buzzed again. Daniel's name. I let it go. Then a text. "Bro, we need to talk." I stared at the screen, furious at how he still had the nerve to act like we could have a civil conversation. But maybe that was exactly what I needed, to look him in the eye and see if he'd dare to justify it. The next day, I called him. He picked up immediately. "Michael," he began. "I'm sorry." I pressed the phone to my ear, pacing the backyard. "You're sorry?" I forced a laugh. "Go on. Explain this to me. How does a brother do that?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he exhaled. "I never meant for it to happen, okay? It started as a conversation, then flirting, then you ended up in a motel, in my father's cabin, in my own bed for all I know. You do realize I found out the baby's not mine, right?" "I know," he said softly. "Rachel told me she's going to do another test, but if it's mine, I plan to." "To what?" "Play dad. Move in with her." I nearly spat the words out. I closed my eyes, fighting the dizziness in my head. "How long has this been going on?" Silence. "Almost a year," he finally admitted. "But we got serious a few months ago." The timeline punched me in the gut. My mind flicked to specific nights. Rachel telling me she had a school function, or that she was crashing early with a headache. Each memory now twisted into a lie. "You bastard," I whispered. "You're supposed to be my brother." He started to say something else, but I ended the call, unable to hear another word. I needed to face him in person if I was going to do it at all. Over the next few days, thoughts of revenge took darker turns. Sometimes I pictured telling the whole extended family, humiliating them. Sometimes I thought about going to court for custody, but then realized I wasn't even biologically tied to the child. The heartbreak in that revelation nearly brought me to tears. I loved that baby as though she were mine, but I also felt betrayed that she wasn't, like part of me was betrayed by my own innocence. Eventually, Daniel showed up at my house. He knocked. I opened the door, stared into his face. Same hazel eyes as mine, same Carter features, but twisted by guilt. "What do you want?" I asked. "We need to settle this. I can't keep living like this." He took a cautious step inside. "Where's Rachel?" "Gone out for groceries," I replied, though I wasn't sure. I hadn't checked. "Not that it's your business." He stood in the entry, hands shoved in his pockets. "I get it, man. I screwed up. I can't change that." "No, you can't." I looked him over. He was the same kid who used to follow me around, wanting to do everything I did. It made me sick to think he'd idolized me once, and now he'd become the biggest source of pain in my life. "But you can leave." He nodded, swallowing hard. He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a small envelope. "It's a paternity test kit. I was going to send it in again, just to confirm. I know the last test said." "Get out," I growled, stepping toward him. He put up his hands. "All right, I'm going. But I'm not walking away from my responsibilities. If that baby's mine, I'm going to be there for her." The nerve of it. "Like you were there for me." I kicked the door shut behind him as he left, chest heaving. That was it. I didn't realize I was shaking until I tried to pick up a glass of water from the kitchen table and spilled it. My entire body felt like a storm. I had never wanted violence so badly in my life. I had to take a long breath, or else I'd punch a hole in the drywall. Days rolled on. The tension in the house was suffocating. Rachel's attempts at reconciliation grew more desperate. She'd place her hand on my arm, tears brimming in her eyes, whisper apologies that made my stomach churn. It was a toxic brew of pity and anger. Sometimes I pitied her for how trapped she seemed. She'd burned her bridges, and she knew it. Other times, I wanted to fling her across the room with the force of my rage. Of course, I'd never lay a hand on her, but the fantasy of vengeance played in my mind on a loop. One evening, I found her sitting in the nursery, rocking the baby. There was something heartbreakingly serene about the scene, mother and child in dim light. She looked up at me with watery eyes. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. I leaned against the doorframe, feeling that old, familiar ache. "You should be." She looked down at our daughter, or at least the child I thought was mine. "She needs you," Rachel said, voice trembling. "I know it doesn't change the biology, but she loves you." A swirl of emotions tightened in my throat. That little girl had been my world from the second I held her at the hospital. Even now, I felt drawn to her. She was innocent in all this. I stepped forward, gently stroking her tiny hand. My heart broke all over again. Rachel tried to reach out, and I pulled back. When I retreated to the living room, my phone buzzed again. Texts from relatives, from friends. I hadn't told them anything, but apparently, Daniel had started letting the cat out of the bag. Word travels fast in families, especially about scandal. Rage spiked. He was trying to get ahead of the narrative, maybe to paint himself as some remorseful hero. That was my final straw. I decided to act. My father had left us a small but valuable piece of property in Houston, a property that, according to the inheritance, was half Daniel's. I called a lawyer friend of mine to see if it was possible for me to buy out his share or force a sale. Anything to strip him of the legacy, to ensure he'd get as little from the Carter name as possible. The lawyer said the best we could do was force a partition sale and split the proceeds. Not as clean as I'd hoped, but it was something. I told him to begin the paperwork. This was my revenge, a strike where it would hurt him. Financially, historically, the ties that bound us as a family. If he wanted to break me, I'd break everything we shared. Of course, this made waves. Daniel got wind of it, called me up in a fury. "You can't do that," he hissed. I felt a grim satisfaction. "Watch me." He threatened to hire his own attorney. Fine. Let him. I had enough money to see this through. Over the next days, the tension escalated to open hostility. I'd get calls, texts, emails from family, all wanting to know why I was forcing a sale. "Ask Daniel," I told them. "Ask him about Rachel." Most of them didn't ask further. They sensed something dark. The rumor mill churned. People took sides, though no one knew the full story. My mother was gone. My father was gone. so there weren't any parental figures to moderate. It was just me and Daniel, locked in a war of bitter silence. Meanwhile, Rachel drifted around the house like a ghost. She still taught her kindergarten class part-time, but came home hollow-eyed, as if carrying her guilt like an anchor. I'd watch her from the corner of my eye, noticing how she lingered near me, waiting for some sign of forgiveness. None came. I was so tangled in anger I couldn't muster a shred of compassion. But anger is exhausting. One night, after mailing more letters, old scraps of memories back to her mother, I collapsed on the living room floor, just like I had that first day. I pressed my forehead to the carpet, realizing how drained I was. I was losing myself in this vengeful crusade. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "We need to talk." She was in the next room. But that's how bad things had gotten. She texted me rather than approach me. I didn't respond. That same night, I had a dream about my father. He was stern but calm, asking me if this was who I wanted to be. I woke up drenched in sweat, an ache in my chest so deep I could barely breathe. The next morning, a letter arrived. It was from Daniel, though not official or legal. Just a handwritten note. I debated shredding it, but curiosity won. It read, "I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I'm sorry. I never meant to destroy us. I know you're selling the property. Fine. I can't change what I did. But if the baby's mine, I'll do my duty, because I won't abandon her like Dad abandoned so many of our needs. I hope someday you can look at me and not want to kill me. I still love you, bro. I'm sorry." I read it twice. Anger flared, but so did a pang of grief. He was still my brother. I hated him, but I also missed him in the strangest way. We had a lifetime of shared memories. Now, they were all tarnished. I crumpled the letter, shoved it in a drawer. I told myself there was no going back. Over the next week, Rachel hardly spoke. I sensed she was planning something. Then, one morning, I noticed she was packing the small suitcase. She set it near the door. She looked at me with tired eyes. "I'm going to my mother's," she said softly. "Taking the baby?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes. I need space. For me, for her. Maybe it's what you need too." I said nothing. Just gave a curt shrug. She waited, tears glistening. But I offered no comfort. Finally, she left. A strange hush fell over the house. At first, I relished it. No more tension, no more guilt saturating the rooms. Then, the emptiness hit me. The baby's crib was empty, the living room silent. My own footsteps echoed on the hardwood. For the first time, I felt the scale of what I was losing. My family. Even if it was built on a lie, I still felt the ache of its absence. I got a call from the lawyer, updating me on the property sale. The final steps were in motion. Soon, the property would be gone. Maybe that was what I needed, to burn all the bridges. But that night, I sat in the baby's room, staring at the little mobile above the crib, spinning silently. I imagined her tiny fingers reaching for the plastic stars. My anger receded, replaced by a cold emptiness. I realized I had done nothing but lash out, try to hurt them the way they hurt me. Yet the real cost was my own sense of peace. I'd gained nothing. I still felt like I was lying on that motel floor, eavesdropping on their betrayal. I wanted to call Rachel, or Daniel, or someone. But I was too proud. I sank deeper into the bitterness, each day blending into the next. Work offered no solace. Even my boss asked if I needed a leave. I refused. A few nights later, I found myself at a bar I used to visit in my 20s, nursing a whiskey. A friend from high school recognized me, asked how I was doing. I gave a polite half-truth. Then, as the whiskey warmed my veins, my walls cracked. I told him everything in disjointed pieces. The friend, bless him, listened, patted my shoulder, told me I should do what's right for the child, that revenge only leaves more ashes. I laughed bitterly. Easier said than done. But his words got under my skin. Back home, I sat on the floor in the hallway again. The same damn spot I'd collapsed that first day. Something in me snapped. I realized I couldn't live in this state forever. Angry, alone, locked in a cycle of petty payback. The revenge had not filled the hole inside me. If anything, it made the hole bigger. I thought of the baby's future. Did I really want her to grow up in this swamp of hatred? Biology aside, I had loved her, and I still did. I thought of my father's meltdown after my mother died, how he turned inward and shut us out, how we both ached for him to open up. I was turning into the same man. I went to the garage, found an old trunk where I'd hidden the torn photos of Rachel and me, along with the box of mementos. I opened it, rummaging through our wedding pictures, the day we said our vows. We looked so happy, so certain. Tears welled up. I felt them drip onto the glossy paper, the images warping. Then I found the baby's hospital tag, the one they gave me when she was born. My name on it, marking me as her father. I cradled it in my palm like a fragile relic. Didn't matter what the genetic test said. In my heart, for those first weeks, I was her dad. I don't know how long I sat there. Time lost meaning. But when I stood, I felt something shift inside me. Some part of the rage dissolved, replaced by a grim acceptance. I was done letting anger dictate my life. I called my lawyer, told him I wanted to halt the property sale. He said it was almost final. But I insisted. I'd pay any penalties. Then I called Daniel. He answered. I said, "Meet me at Dad's cabin." "Michael, just do it," I said, and hung up. The next day, I drove to the cabin. The place still smelled like old wood and memories. Daniel was already there, leaning against his car with a tense expression. I parked, walked up, my fists clenched, ready for a fight, but I forced them open. "Thanks for coming," I said, voice low. He stared, uncertain. "Why here?" "Because this is where it started, apparently." I motioned to the door. "Let's go inside." We stepped in. The air was stale, the furniture coated in dust. I took a seat on the old couch. Daniel stood, shifting from foot to foot. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but it's the truth." I studied the scar on his forearm, remembering how I'd held his hand in the ER when we were kids. "I hate you for what you did," I said quietly, "but I can't live the rest of my life chasing revenge. I'm tired, Daniel. Tired of feeling like I'm the only one who lost something." He lowered his gaze. "I lost my brother. That's a lot." Silence stretched. Eventually, I said, "I'm calling off the property sale." He let out a breath. "Thank you. Look, I never wanted to steal Rachel." He seemed to struggle for words. "We got close, and it happened. I can't change that. If the baby is mine, I'll step up. But if you want to be in her life too, I won't stop you." That cut deeper than I expected. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Anger, sadness, relief. "We'll sort it out," I murmured. "This place." I gestured to the cabin. Dad left it to both of us. He'd be ashamed of how we turned out. Daniel nodded, blinking rapidly. Yeah, he would. I stood up, walked out onto the porch. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in orange and pink. "I'm not saying I forgive you," I said, feeling him step up behind me. "You broke something in me and in my marriage. Maybe it can't be fixed. But I can't keep living in hate." He didn't reply for a moment. Then he said, "I understand." A breeze rustled the pines. I closed my eyes, feeling an odd peace settle over me, less a sense of closure and more a small step toward it. We stood there, not speaking, each wrapped in our own regrets. Then I turned, walked to my car. Daniel followed me with his gaze but didn't push. I drove back to my empty house, mind swirling. Rachel was there. She must have come back from her mother's early. Suitcase near the door. The baby in her arms. They both looked worn out. Our eyes met. "I heard you called off the sale," she said softly. I didn't answer. I just looked at our child, who stirred in her mother's arms, blinking up at me. My chest ached with longing. "I need some time," I said, voice hoarse. "I'm not sure what this means." She nodded, tears glistening. "I understand." We talked. Carefully, haltingly. She admitted she felt neglected, that in her darkest moments, Daniel seemed like a lifeline. I admitted I'd been so focused on providing financially that I forgot to tend to the relationship. Doesn't justify what she did, but I understood, in my own raw way, how it spiraled. We reached no resolution that night, but we reached understanding. We were broken, and it might not be fixable, but we'd handle it like adults for the baby's sake. In the days that followed, I spent more time at home. I fed the baby, changed her diapers, tried to find some bond again, even though every time I looked into her eyes, I felt a pang of sadness that she wasn't mine by blood. Rachel and I still slept in separate rooms, speaking only when necessary. But slowly, a fragile civility emerged. I realized I didn't have to choose between being her father in spirit and harboring endless resentment. Maybe there was a path forward, not exactly the life I'd planned, but a life. One morning, I sat on the floor of the nursery, the baby in my lap. She gurgled, grabbing at my finger. For the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. A real, honest smile. Something cracked in my chest. I felt a wave of emotions. Grief, love, acceptance. I pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, inhaling her baby scent, so different from the stale odor of betrayal that had haunted me. I understood then that this child would always be part of me, no matter whose DNA flowed in her veins. Rachel watched from the doorway, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't say anything. Words weren't needed. In that moment, I saw her heartbreak, her regret, and I recognized my own reflection in her pain. Maybe we'd never be what we were, but at least we could face each other without claws out. The final piece was me, letting go of the fury that had knotted my soul. I realized that revenge had cost me as much as the betrayal. I'd spent weeks drowning in it, losing my own sense of self. Now, as I gently rocked the baby, I found a sliver of calm. The swirling storm of my thoughts slowed. Maybe this was the start of rebuilding a life on whatever terms made sense. I didn't know if Rachel and I would stay married. I didn't know if Daniel and I would ever speak again beyond logistics. But I knew one thing. I couldn't live pinned to the floor by anger anymore. I heard Daniel's words in my head. "I still love you, bro." I felt Rachel's trembling apologies. I felt the baby's tiny grip on my finger. In that swirl of heartbreak, I finally discovered the barest flicker of acceptance. Maybe that's all I needed to stop lying on the floor of my own life, paralyzed by betrayal. Maybe that's how I'd find a way to stand, breathe, and move forward, scars and all. So I took a breath, looked at my daughter, yes, my daughter, no matter the blood, and let the breath out. Something loosened in me, something that had been knotted since the day I smelled someone else on my pillow, and in that letting go, I found room to be myself again, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next. I pressed my cheek to the baby's head, closed my eyes, and let the last of my rage slip away. That's when I finally understood. The cost of my revenge wasn't worth the price. I was done paying for it. Maybe it was time to start healing, piece by fractured piece, and for the first time in months, I felt my heart beat steady and real, like a man returning to himself.